So, the F1 is on. Well, it's now on a month-long break, which is just after the Hungarian Grand Prix, after that disaster. And the Olympics is on for the next few days. So I've got to get this video out quite soon. But there's no F1 in the Olympics. In fact, there's no motorsport of any kind in the Olympics. Why? Why is there no motorsport in the Olympics? You see, I'm going to break this down very quickly. Well, not really quickly. I want the video to be a decent length and just sort of split it into a few parts. So first off, let's look at the history of motorsport in the Olympics and also motorsport competing on an international stage. First off, in the 1900 Olympics, there was sort of motorsport. Sort of. It's not official. It is not an official event, but at the same time as there was Olympics in Paris in the year 1900, there was also motorsport events going on that were awarding medals in Paris in the summer of 1900. Whether you want to, kind of mix the two together and say they are Olympic events, the IOC definitely don't want to. That is the International Olympic Committee. So there were, but there weren't. But there were. But there weren't. This is confusing. Also, outside of Olympics, F1 has sort of done, well, motorsports as general has sort of done national team sports a few times, like almost an F1 World Cup. There was the A1GP in the mid to late 2000s, which failed quite heavily. That's, I think, a video for another time. Recently, there was also the FIA Motorsport Games, which was sort of like the FIA's own Olympic thing, only not featuring the best of things. It was like GT3, touring car, Formula 4, some like drifting, karting, and even esports was in there. They made their own little medal table. It's quite cool. There's only been one of those run so far though, and it wasn't really featuring the best of races. So there has been history, but there hasn't really in the Olympic Games. What is the biggest issues? Well, for a start, I think we have to look at it logistically. You have the FIA and you have the IOC. These are two massive committees for sports. One is running motorsport basically by itself. One is running the Olympic Games. And the FIA will want the F1 to stay as the pinnacle of motorsport. The Olympic Games will say no, it's the Olympics. It's the pinnacle of all sport. Therefore, if the F1 is in this is now the pinnacle of motorsport. So then you've got to try and work out a compromise. Will the FIA want their technology, their cars, everything that's worked on, will they want to supply their licenses to the Olympics? I don't think they will. I think they want to keep it to themselves and have the F1. This leaves the IOC, if they wanted to do motorsport and the Olympic Games, this leaves them with a lack of a chassis, a lack of a spec, kind of what to work off, the lack of pit crews, of engineers, any of that sort of thing. And they'd also want, the IOC cause their own issues as well. They also will want everything to be equal and independent. They won't want countries to be working on their own cars. I don't mean to offend anyone here when I say that, I'm going to say Thailand with Alex Albon. I'm sure Thailand has some great engineers, but working with F1 cars, I'm sure a country like Japan, who have Honda making all the engines, or Germany, who have made the best F1 car for the past 6 or 7 years with Mercedes now, they're going to have a few better engineers. And the IOC won't want that. That's just one piece of issue. So then you have independent pit crews, independent mechanics, cars that have to be a spec series. And then we bring it to the pit lanes, right? So when you go into a pit lane, you're racing with 20 people, you're usually allocated like 2 cars to a pit box because it's teams. You have 2 cars per team. Sometimes it's 3. F3 right now has 3, but they don't do mandatory pit stops, so it's kind of viable. So 2 cars per pit stop generally. You're going to have that same rule. You can't have 20 different pit boxes in most circuits. So this leaves the issue of strategy. You can't have strategy when some teams are racing with maybe 2 competitive. Some even 3. I'd probably say 2, just to make it the fairest. If a country is racing with 2, you can't have a country walk in with 5 different races and then take on countries that only have 1 or 2 races. But even with 2 versus 1, you then have the issue of fairness, of double stacking. That one country, maybe if it's Poland racing with Robert Kubica, and then a Monaco with Charles Leclerc. They're 2 people that could very easily be racing in this Olympic sport if you're taking the best of the best, but they're not going to have teammates. When they get double stacked, is it fair? This causes another big issue, right? So you've got that issue, you've got the fairness issue. The only way to take that out a lot is going to be non-mandatory pit stops, But then a safety car comes out. You go to box and guess what? The other person's gone to box too. You then get delayed because you're racing with that other person. That's one of many reasons why it's not feasible. The next reason we're going to look at is going to be the competitors. You're an F1 driver. You want to race at the top of the top. But you might have contracts with the FIA. They might say you can't go and race in a different series. Or you might just say, the Olympics isn't really that appealing to me. Football, for example. You don't have Messi or Ronaldo competing at the Olympics, even though you can take 3 over 23 players. Sometimes they just want a break. They don't really care about the Olympics because they are racing in one of the biggest motorsport series in the world, and they think that proves it for them anyway. So what would an Olympics be without Hamilton, without Verstappen, without Norris, without these sorts of top people? Yeah, you see the issue here. Realistically, you also need a super license to drive, and I sort of think 40 competitors, so you have 2 heats of 20 going into a final race of 20, the top 10 go through in each. That would be a fair thing. And finding 40 different people with a super license is quite awkward. I've already said earlier that in this ideal series, you would have 2 people maximum per country. So this is the list that I have come up with. As you can see, it is got big names on there. It's got Hamilton, it's got Verstappen, it's got Bottas, it's got Perez, it's got Stroll, it's got Norris. Stroll is now a big name. But it's also got people like Jose Maria Lopez from WEC, who I don't know whether he's ever driven open wheel before. It's got people like Gianluca Petikov, who look completely out of place in F2. But these are the people that will be needed to fill the list. There aren't that many top tier F1 level racers. Even Guan Yu Zhou at the bottom there, I've kind of been a bit cheeky here. He has 39 points on his super license, not 40, to get the actual F1 level super license. So that's the second issue, competitors. Will you get the best competitors to race? There is one more very big issue that I think needs looking at, and that is tracks. You see, I'm going to say you need a grade 1 track, mostly, it's F1, they always need grade 1, or high level grade 2. These are the 2 tracks that you need. The grade 2 would have to be upgraded to a grade 1, but it's monetarily feasible for an Olympic Games where they're actually building stadiums and stuff. Let's look at the Olympics from the start of the century to the furthest forward one that we know, which is going to be 2032. And we start off with Sydney. Sydney has no tracks right next to it. The nearest track that it has that's grade 1 is Albert Park, and it has no real grade 2 viable tracks nearby either. And Albert Park, it is in Melbourne, it is far away. As much as people might think Australia is not that big, it is absolutely huge. So, it is viable. It's not really held in the Sydney Olympics at that point, but it is in the same country. Whereas if we go to 2004, in Athens, we don't have that luxury. You see, Athens in Greece, there are no grade 1 or 2 circuits. The nearest decent level circuit is Ceres, which is grade 3, only a 3-kilometre circuit, and is up near Thessaloniki. 2008, Beijing. China only has 1 grade 1 circuit, a surprising fact actually. You'd have thought they'd have more. And it's in Shanghai, which it's down the east coast. That is a very big east coast that it's down though. It is very far away, and China does have some grade 2 circuits. It has Zhuhai, it has Ningbo, it has Chengdu, and it has Ordos, which is the closest circuit, quite near to Beijing actually, but would still need a lot of modification. Again, it's going to cost a lot of money, or it's going to be really far away. 2012, London. We have Silverstone. Silverstone is pretty nearby. That's very easy to get to, very viable, not too bad. There's also Brands Hatch, very nearby, and then things like Donington, Alton Parks, Netterton, they're a bit further away. But they're all grade 2 as well, so they're not really viable. It would be in Silverstone, let's be honest. 2016, Rio. There's only one grade 1 or 2 circuit in Brazil, and it is Interlagos. It's just down the coast from Rio. It's Sao Paulo. Not too bad. It's not one of the worst offenders we've seen on the list, and it holds some pretty good racing. I think that's a more doable one. 2020, Tokyo. Easily the most doable one. You have Fuji literally next door. I mean, they cycled bikes to there in the road races over the Olympics this year. There's also Suzuka, which isn't far away. In terms of grade 2 races, Autopolis, Twin Ring Motegi, Okayama and Sugo are all available, but you'd be racing at Fuji, let's be honest. Then in the next 4 years we have, well, 3 years now actually, we have Paris. Paris, 2 tracks in France. They're grade 1, you have Manicourt and you have Le Castellet. Grade 2 tracks, you have Le Mans, Les Dedans, Val de Vienne and Nogaro. Those are all grade 2, all viable, but the grade 1 ones would be Roastin, probably would be Manicourt, considering Le Castellet is miles away. 2028 is in LA, and America has a lot of circuits, see all this list. Unfortunately only 3 grade 1 ones, which are COTA, the Name Miami one, and Indianapolis, and they are all on, well, sort of the wrong side of the country. But look at all these grade 2s, there's so many. Even things like Long Beach, right next door, Laguna Seca, you would never see an F1 car do the corkscrew. They're all grade 2, they're all adaptable, maybe. And then 2032, the Olympics we know the furthest away, the least about, it's in Brisbane. It has the same issues as Sydney. Melbourne is still far away from Brisbane. It's same issues. Albert Park's the closest. Of course, there are solutions to this. There are 2 solutions that I can offer. Number 1 is build a whole new circuit near to your big city that's holding it. You know, you are spending money on the Olympics. It is viable. It's not. That is a lot of money. You would need to be like Kuwait or Dubai to do that. And they already have circuits, so they wouldn't do it. But there is a second solution, and it's going to scare every F1 fan ever. This solution is street circuits. Easier to build, you just put barriers up, and a lot easier to take down when the event's over. But it offers very little good racing in an F1 car because they are massive. Yeah, you know the issues. So these are all the issues that I could think of off the top of my head for doing F1 at the Olympics. Whether it's venues, competitors, or even just, you know, who's running it. There is a lot that needs to be worked out. But there is a solution for motorsports in general, and very specifically for Formula in general. For an open wheel racing series, for a Formula series that can work, that can fit in this sort of scenario, that can race in smaller areas, that can host races that might not be the top of the top, but might still be good and worthy of competing at a top stage. There is Formula E, and that is the future of motorsport at the Olympics. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and, well, if you want to see motorsport at the Olympics, leave a comment. Leave a comment suggesting how you would do it. Would you do Formula E, or would you try and get Formula 1 to work? It's been lovely talking to you guys today, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.